Hey everybody, welcome to Sailsconf. I am McNeil, and I am supposed to be in Nigeria with you right now. Uh, However, I'm not, and unfortunately, my reason kind of stinks. It's that I renewed my passport about 3 months ago, and as it turns out, you have to have a passport that's been renewed within 6 months if you're traveling from the US to Nigeria, in order to get a visa. So I am crushed, frankly. I was really, really excited about being there with you guys. And I also had been planning this trip really since about a year ago, um, and certainly learned some lessons. I also learned that no matter how hard you try, you cannot get around that requirement. Tried a few different ways to do that. So anyways, we're doing a recorded talk. It's about 11 p.m. here in Austin, Texas, and we are going to be talking today about go-to-market. So what is go-to-market? You may have seen this acronym GTM before, or go-to-market. Usually it's not written like this. You also may not have. I think I barely had seen it myself like 3 years ago. And a simple way to think about this phrase is really as a combination of marketing and selling. I'm not going to say sales to avoid confusion. And everything else that you basically have to do to make money. After all, we got into this whole programming thing for fun and profit. So let's talk about how we do that. So, like, first of all, there is no separate category of humans known as the business or business people, right? It's just like code. Anybody can learn to do it. And I would just add that if you can build an app, if you've learned to code, you will have no problem mechanizing a business. Now, everyone has different strengths, but at the end of the day, we can all write code if we really want to, and we can all sell, and we can all market, and we can all run processes if we want to. Selling is just listening and actually caring what the other person says and focusing on them long enough to hear it. I got a comment from a customer of Fleet recently, actually two different comments over the past few weeks, just them thanking me and reminding me that if only our other vendors would just shut up and listen. That's really it. And growth or demand gen or marketing or the different words you'll hear associated with this, growth is just like troubleshooting anything else, whether it's a broken app or a broken refrigerator. You need to kind of use the scientific method. And just because you're good at code doesn't mean you can't be good at selling and marketing and using those same skills in other ways. You actually have an advantage because you already know how to do the nouns and the verbs, like the database and the imperative logic, and you have troubleshooting experience. Like you've seen stuff not work before. And you may still be worried, I know I was at first, that you don't know enough, right? Like maybe you built an app, it's the first thing you're bringing to market, and you're going to launch. You know, there's so many things you can read on the internet that tell you, you don't know how to do this, or there's a fancy way of doing this. But chances are none of those fancy things, whether it's A/B testing or some kind of special like automations you're supposed to be doing, or like email deliverability, like what if all my email just starts going to spam? Like all of these problems are pretty small compared to the stuff where people normally get stuck. And those problems are actually going to be solved by you thinking from first principles and kind of following your nose. Customer relationship management systems, or CRMs, like Salesforce, are really just a database. And all of these sales and MarTech tools are really just kind of like any other API, just older. And those that are more kind of full featured are even more like a database, right? So it's kind of like using Waterline in your Sales.js app. The technology part across the board is the same. Like, you don't need to use WordPress to build your website. You can do it with GitHub Pages. You can do it in Sales.js, like we do at Fleet. You can do it in HubSpot. You can use HubSpot to instrument it, or you can just like write code that captures events in your actual front-end code, or in your back-end code. And I've done it both ways on projects in the past. You can have those go through segment.com, a Twilio product, or you can have them go directly to Google Analytics or some other analytics tool. You can choose to store them in the database. Like, you can do like any of those things. And we're all about conventions over configurations in the Sales.js and MVC framework world. So, we'll talk about kind of a more prescriptive way to do it. But before we get into that, just keep in mind, you don't have to do anything one particular way just because now you're doing selling and marketing. You are still smart. You still have good instincts, and you should still pretend that you understand databases, because you do. And it's so easy to get talked out of the knowledge that you already have, and you are the best person to make the decision about. So what I mean, GTM technology, or go-to-market technology, I just mean marketing tech, like HubSpot, or sales operations technology, like Salesforce, or also HubSpot, because they have CRM features. If these words don't make any sense to you, don't worry. We'll define them more in a bit, but you're probably picking up a bit by context. And if not, it'll get better, promise. But these things, these products that you buy, and they're pretty expensive a lot of times, they integrate with each other. There is code, or at least logic, like Zapier, stitching all that stuff together. And really, it's a product. It's an app like any other. Neither marketing nor sales have usually ever built an app. And they're not really equipped to like know how to maintain an app. Even if they went out and built one, like, what are the chances that they actually took it to market? They actually worked on a team with other people and did database migrations on it, and did all of the things that you've done as a developer, or have learned to do, at least if you're still early in your career, or are learning to do if you're just learning right now. And contrary to popular opinion, that is exactly the same skill set that you're going to need to work with these other tools like Salesforce. There's still data, there's still logic, and there's still the equivalent of database migrations that have to happen. There's the equivalent of change control that really should happen. So this is like the equivalent of code owners in your GitLab or GitHub repo. We'll get to that in a second. But marketing, and I'm going to pick on marketing just because it's almost a broader topic than just selling. And also the word sales is confusing for us here. But marketing is just one stakeholder that drives your roadmap for this internal product that we call the website and the go-to-market technology. It's very common to hear the advice, hey, get someone who knows what they're doing in here quickly and give them carte blanche, right? Meaning give them let them change whatever they want, and basically just run with it. And that's great, right? Unless they've never designed a database before. And then what you've done is you've taken the person that's least experienced in your team, and you've said, hey, why don't you design our database? And everyone else will like deal with the migrations. Needless to say, it can get pretty like confusing, right? You end up prioritizing the wrong things. You end up delegating like too early, because you don't want to be a control freak, right? And you want to like give people ownership and let them succeed. But unfortunately, what you need at that moment really isn't a marketer or a salesperson. What you really need is a developer. So you'll hear this advice that there are three kinds of marketer. There's a brand marketer, there's a product marketer, and then there's demand generation. And this is a true thing. There really are kind of profiles you can go find if you just snoop around on LinkedIn. But none of those three kinds of marketer is the right person to set up your go-to-market systems. My advice is this. First, be one kind of developer and entrepreneur, the one kind of person you already are with the skills you already have, and use those. Then start listening to other people's advice. So anyways, speaking of advice, you're hearing a bunch of stuff, and you're probably wondering, who is this guy? Why should I listen? So I'm Mike. I'm the creator of Sales.js. My Twitter or X or whatever is in these slides if you want to check it out. And I'm also the CEO of Fleet, a platform for IT and security and platform teams, especially teams with like lots of computers and servers who need to do device management and vulnerability management and basically all the stuff you need to do to keep computers healthy, secure, and functional in terms of employee experience. And it's open source software to let you do that. And our website is entirely built on Sales.js. About me, I also have my flaws listed here, at least a few of them. I'm sure there are more that are not here. I know there are more that are not here, but you can learn a little bit more about who I am there. And that's just in Fleet's handbook, which is also hosted by Sales.js. I guess before we get into like all the nitty gritty, right? Keep in mind that my knowledge is limited by and kind of like twisted by the journeys that I've been on so far up until today. So probably the most relevant is currently I am the CEO of a growing but still sub 10 million ARR enterprise SaaS company. So what that means, in case those are new acronyms for you, is ARR means annual recurring revenue, meaning that's how much money comes in every year from paying customers. And then SaaS means software as a service, which we won't go too much into that. But basically, people pay us a license subscription, and or they get hosting depending on their deal and what they need. And we give them Fleet Premium, which is just like Fleet Free, but with some extra features. I also founded a dev and design shop back in, well, officially in 2012 and did a few projects before then. And that shop is called Balderdash. And we built a lot of things, worked with a lot of different contractors, employees. We even had a physical office for a while in Austin, Texas. And yeah, built built so many apps that I think I was like the top 15 in the top 15 of most active users on GitHub from in 2014 and 2016 or something like that in there. And the reason I say all that is because it is a lot of code, and especially a lot of code from the very beginning of projects, right? Like setting things up, getting a team equipped to run with them, and then kind of getting out of the way, and usually doing that pretty fast. Over time, we started working with customers on bigger and longer projects. And actually, one of those projects is a project we worked on for a little over 2 years, which is a consumer real estate technology company. Built that up from $0 to 100K, $100,000 a month in revenue. And I put MRR there, which means monthly recurring revenue, but it wasn't exactly recurring revenue. It was actually more like TurboTax, if you've seen that business model, where people pay like a flat fee, and it was around real estate transactions. So the reason I get into all that detail is it's all pretty different, like these kinds of companies. And the way that you do each piece of go-to-market is a little bit different depending on the different kind of companies that you're talking about. There is an overarching similarity though, and that's kind of what you're looking at here. Like this is the funnel. The funnel is basically what does it take to get from a set of eyeballs somewhere out there in the world and filter that down further. Let's take the community, right? Filter that down to a particular audience or maybe a target account, like a particular company you want to go sell to. Maybe that's IBM or Facebook, let's say. Or it doesn't even have to be a company. It could be, you know, the Red Cross. It could be the Nigerian government. It could be I don't know, the New York Stock Exchange. And then you get an impression, right? You get someone sees your ad, someone sees your organic social media posts, someone sees your organic search results. They run into you at an event. They see like a billboard or something if you're getting real wild, hear about you on the radio. And then lo and behold, one day they become a visitor on your website or some other kind of like property that you have. Arguably, you could say like a booth at a conferences. Kind of that. And then they become a contact, right? So at some point you actually have them written down. You actually know who they are. You might even have a good way to get in touch with them, but you at least know kind of who they are. This is where you might want to start enriching that information more. I mean, you'll enrich all along the way. And by enrich, I just mean, you know, think of your in an app, you would maybe have a record in the database that had some fields missing. Like you could go pull data from other APIs to fill in those missing attributes for a particular record for one of your models, right? That's all I mean by enrichment here is basically like, let's say you get someone's email or you get where they work and you get their first and last name. You can take that information and go fill in the number of employees, for example, that work at their company. Which you can use to rate the contact. Various other things like that. Once you have contacts, there's no real action happening, right? At least not from your side. You, the marketer, the seller, we'll just call it what it is. The person who is normally a developer has taken this on, right? You've got. And on the other side of that, though, you have this person, this contact, and they're actually doing things. They're interacting with your brand, right? They are maybe they're just thinking about your brand. Maybe they're hearing about it from friends. Activity is occurring that's affecting their psychology, and it moves them through these kind of psychological stages, which again are sort of their own kind of funnel, where you have people going from being completely unaware of your brand to awareness to intrigue to a use case to personal confidence and then eventually buy-in from their team if that's needed for your product. And then one way or the other you get to leads. So I won't get too much more into that right now. I'll stop it there. But leads are basically some kind of actionable intent. And it's actually a thing you'll be fighting with a little bit in Salesforce if you are using that CRM. So anyways, that's the funnel. As you can see, it goes on and on. But what is GTM, right? So GTM is the funnel, but there's also all of this stuff you have to do. And a lot of the times, especially if you're someone who's kind of been first and foremost a developer or an entrepreneur historically, you've really been focused on kind of that very first bullet here, delivering value. You've been thinking a lot about what does it take, just anything, right? What will it take to get somebody to be a happy customer who understands how to use our thing, right? Or let's say it's a professional services business, you know, that has signed on a contract, is like kicking off the project and is at least so far happy, would be the equivalent. Then there's upsells, like internal expansions. There's external referrals, so like getting introduced to more potential customers. And then if it's a subscription business, eventually the renewal. Aside, you'll notice I don't get too much into stuff like marketplaces here. There's like a whole different side of the funnel to think about and ways of doing accounting for things like marketplaces. And you may find that your business is an exception. Nevertheless, I think you will still be able to apply like 80% of what we talk about here. But I'll leave that as an exercise for you. So we've all gotten pretty good at delivering value. But once we start to really take that and mechanize it and really go to market with that, there is, you got to do that at scale, right? So that section of the funnel becomes a little bit more interesting. Meanwhile, now you have to receive money, right? Which it turns out is a lot more than just accepting a Stripe credit card, especially depending on your business and how you bill. And then up at the mouth of the funnel, right? It turns out this is a lot more than just like creating a sitemap.xml and setting up a Google Analytics script tag, although we'll get into that a little bit too. But this is one of the areas we'll spend the most time on. And then how it actually works. This is actually just a set of examples and demos that we're going to refer to throughout the talk, and we'll actually look into some code. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about doing the marketing. Like, what does it mean to do the marketing? We won't get too much into like, what does it mean to do the selling? Because depending on your business, your product, you may not even need to do direct selling. You may not have a sales force, as in a group of people who sell and work for you. Or you might, but we're going to focus mostly on all of the tools of the funnel that make the whole thing work, whether or not you have physical salespeople doing the selling or not, or if it's all self-service. But starting with delivering value. So remember, this is the very bottom of the funnel. This is one of the areas we're like the most acquainted with as developers. So this is how we give the stuff that the customer wants to the customer. Somehow they have to be able to get it. So in the world of open source, one way that you can get stuff is you can go onto GitHub or GitLab and you can hit download and you can get the zip and you can open it up. You can go to a release, you can get like even like a signed binary in some cases. You might even go to the App Store for an app, right? For a web app, you might navigate to a URL and now you're getting the latest app. And this is not a talk on DevOps, so we won't get into like all the different ways of deploying and building these things and CI/CD and like code owners. And actually the Sailsconf talk from 2022 has a bit on this. And then 2023, my talk, Sales at Scale, gets a little bit more into some of these concepts. Again, just based on experience and first principles, certainly not an expert. Yeah, so you have all these different ways to get code, right? Maybe if you're selling a physical plastic toy, you actually ship these things out in the mail. Or if you're selling vacation tours, you actually had to fulfill the trip. If you're selling insurance, you have to fulfill claims. If you're selling factory monitoring equipment, you have to go like make it so people can actually pick up the equipment. If you're selling smart blenders kits, you have to make it so people can like receive those at their house, and you get the idea. There's all the stuff that you probably already have some familiarity with here, if not as a developer, then as a consumer, right? In the App Store, you see release notes, or in Google Play if you're an Android. I may be dating myself. I don't even know if they still call it Google Play. It's been a while since I touched an Android phone. Maybe that'll change soon. But you've seen these things, right? You've seen the fact that, hey, updates come out, updates need to be run. We did a new release, or it's being released all day, 20 times a day on a website somewhere. All that good stuff is we take it for granted, right? All of it also has to be instrumented such that people who are not actually in the code can kind of see what's going on. And I would say that's probably the spot where I've seen the most projects sort of just dive off a cliff. It's never the thing you're going to want to get around to building. It's sort of in that land of like admin dashboards and quote unquote reporting. And then I think I had been an entrepreneur for sure for 5 years and definitely a developer for 5 years before I ever really even knew that most people are hooking up to other systems for this. So people, anytime they can, are going to try to not build more UI, right? Or at least folks that have experienced the cost of that before, because you have to maintain all that stuff and keep it up to date. And if you're doing that for your admin dashboard, the nicer you make it, the more work it is to deal with. And there's several ways to handle this. I've seen it pretty diverse in terms of how folks get up to this stuff. But a tactic I like is using the CRM, or the customer relationship management system, which now is probably a pretty good time to show you what that looks like. So if you've never used Salesforce before, this is kind of what it looks like. For a while, there was all of these sort of bear cat looking people with raccoon tails and hoodies. So if you might have seen that, like that, I don't know what happened there. They used to be the empty states and stuff. We seem to have moved past that, which I think is probably for the best. But what you're looking at here is sort of a censored view of Fleet's Salesforce instance. Some of these people actually are real, so sorry if you happen to be one of them. But we're going to pick a name that we recognize here, Eric Shaw, or actually there I am. And you can see Eric was doing some kind of testing. He's come back as a cactus. And this comes from this silly idea that you can ride a horse, you can definitely ride a unicorn, but you can't ride a cactus. And this is because when Fleet first started, we really just were super, super limited on resources. And the only folks we could really work with were folks that had enough computers or enough servers to make basically to make the price tag worth engaging in a subscription agreement with. And still to this day, we use this sort of emoji rating system to let us know, like, okay, so like where are folks at? We love the folks that are under 100 employees though, because they often give us a lot of great feedback, and they actually tend to have an easier time deploying Fleet themselves, which is neat. And again, that's just a specific detail of Fleet's business, because we also have a self-managed model where you can either we'll host the product for you on a managed, like a devoted subdomain, or you can host it yourself and we'll give you a license and support. So that's what that is. That's driven by the employee count, which actually gets automatically enriched. And in this case, you can see if I click the account. So account, we'll get to some terminology review later, but account just means company or organization. So you can see a bunch of test users here, and you can see a bunch of emojis. I'll give you a second to absorb this. And you can see one thing we're working on is normalizing these URLs, actually, because this HTTPS in your CRM, oh, that one's good. And same for this subdomain. In your CRM, the CRM tries its best to do uniqueness, which, hey, that sounds familiar, right? Because again, it's just a database. And it's involved, and I won't get into the details right now. But yeah, so in this case, what we did is we actually sanitized it on the way in. Whether this LinkedIn URL is automatically enriched or if it's been provided, it's getting kind of chopped down to its simplest form, so that way lookups recognize existing users and you don't end up with 20 copies of the same person. So we'll look at contacts this way for a second, because then you can see a few side by side. So you can see we have a name, we have a goal, which is just these glasses here. So clear glasses means IT, right? Or IT associated. So IT is a department at a lot of larger companies. IT tends to instill the people that report to it with the goal of making everything work, making employees more productive, making their employee experience better, making sure their computers don't crap out on them, making sure they don't have to wait forever for their computers, giving them like the best tools and helping them like fix them when they break with as little downtime as possible. And more, right? And SaaS too. But that's IT. And then here you have these sunglasses, and that's actually referring to security, because much like regular glasses help you see better and make everything work, sunglasses keep you safe. And that's what security is really focused on, right? As a department, anyone who reports into security wants to keep people safe. And this is all for companies and organizations that actually have security departments and have IT departments that are dedicated because they're bigger. But that's goal. And so, like, again, that's very specific to Fleet's business. Fleet sells to both of those departments, as well as other departments that are connected to those two departments. Sometimes there's a separate identity team or crossover from an SRE team. And if you don't know what those things are, don't worry, it's not worth it. But again, gets pretty specific. But as you can see, the good thing about CRMs is they're just basically a database. Like, this thing is just a model called contact, and these columns are just attributes. You get into Salesforce and you're like, wait a second. So that's what you're dealing with here. You could have built this little app in Sales yourself. It would not have been nearly as generic, nor full featured as an admin dashboard. But plenty of folks go about building their admin that way, and that can be a great start. For Fleet, we went into Salesforce right away because we were going to be doing enterprise selling from the beginning. And Salesforce is like the tool you use for that purpose, for various reasons that may or may not be fully valid, but are valid enough for now that it was the right decision, I think. Won't get into too much more of it now, other than to say that this role is yet another emoji, and we'll kind of revisit this. This is in as much as like the unicorn is based on the employee count, or the goal is based on the department, the role is really based on the title. And what we have here is just like an elf, we have Rudolph, and then we have MX Claus. And the elf is someone who would be like an individual contributor, or someone who's a very technical hands-on manager. The Rudolph is someone who's in more of a program manager role, where they're sort of like pulled in multiple directions at once because they're trying to keep everything moving. And then the Santa here is someone who's going to like sign the contract, or like a CISO or a CIO, a VP, a director. Again, specific to our business because we're enterprise SaaS at Fleet, but thinking about, your relationship with a CRM system, the same could be true for you. Or it could not be. It could be slightly different. And you might not use Salesforce at all. You might use a tool like HubSpot. So you'll also notice there's this psychological stage here. And this goes from has team buy-in, down to personally confident, down to has use case, down to intrigued, down to aware, and then unaware, which is the default, which is where you have no idea what Fleet is. You move to aware once we have some kind of evidence that you actually do know what Fleet is. You might give us evidence that you're intrigued. You might even give us evidence that you have a use case. But none of these things have really indicated that you want us to bother you and go try to like hit you up, right? Because that is a privilege and needs to be respected. So keeping track of where people are at in their journey through caring at all about your brand and being ready, right? Like, maybe they love your brand, but they just don't have a good reason to actually like buy from you. That's kind of what's going on with these psychological stages here. And I make such a big deal about this because this is not a thing that comes out of the box in Salesforce. A lot of times this is a thing that you're expected to kind of build yourself in other tools. A common one is HubSpot or Marketo, and there's more, but I'm just going to name those because those are the really common ones. And there's a category name for them. I think it's called marketing automation, but it doesn't actually really matter because, yeah, when you have hundreds and hundreds of employees and you have a multi-layer marketing team with middle management, maybe even before then, it can be really helpful to get someone who's a pro in one of these tools to come in and really, really optimize the way that you nurture these psychological stages. So getting people from unaware to aware to intrigued, yada, yada, yada. And that's great. But going back to our topic from before, you really aren't ready for that yet. And in fact, you're so far from that if you're just getting your CRM set up or your order management set up, whatever you're using, your system of record, that it's actually almost kind of destructive to start to layer in that much complexity before you're ready for it. And especially before you understand your message and your market. So on that note, let's go ahead and jump ahead to receiving money. So this is going back to our funnel graphic here. So we were talking about kind of that very bottom section, which is the process of like delivering the value. This is where you give someone their milkshake. Before you do that, and sometimes after, but oftentimes before, you get paid, which if it's a credit card purchase on a website, which is what probably most of us have seen or worked with directly before, whether that's like an old school payment gateway or something like Stripe.js, that's kind of just the tip of the iceberg. So you can, whether or not you take the money that way, that's a payment method. You can kind of, you unlock different side adventures, right? So maybe you start off by accepting credit cards, but then maybe you give people a way to pay you later at a different point in their overall transaction of which you're just a part, which is really common in real estate. Or let's say that you are doing the same for like an auto purchase. Like it's going to be slightly different, right? Like there's going to be a dealership involved instead of a broker. And going back to some of just the stuff from my past, like you start to see these kind of patterns in these apps, and you realize like there is an almost unknowably huge amount of complexity and different variations on these things. But the underlying framework, if you sort of drop down to a lower level of abstraction, is really just the stuff that you already know how to do because you already know how to code databases and apps. You'll notice that a lot of things, whether it's creating a new company or managing a team, there's a lot of parallels. And I see that the more and more that I kind of step further away from coding application code on a daily basis and find myself dropping in more to build integrations with stuff like this, or or not coding at all these days. So there's a lot of terminology in the act of receiving money. So in this flow of a Stripe.js transaction or a pay later thing, or a B2B invoicing payment method, you have a lot of systems that branch off, things like bookkeeping, things like ERP systems for inventory management. And we don't really need to get into all of that stuff right now because we're just going to focus on the things that are going to be pretty much true no matter how your business works. And no matter what, you may skip a few steps, you may have a couple of extras depending on what you do. But getting from a lead to a paying customer is always at least kind of a thing. And this is where I'm gonna skin a lot of what I'm sharing from the mental model of someone who's currently deeply involved in an enterprise SaaS business. So bear with me if some of this doesn't feel as immediately relevant. I can promise you that it is. So there's two categories of kind of customer experience, the people, and you could say kind of business, but I think customer experience might be a little bit more accurate because you can have businesses that have both of these. For example, Fleet, PLG there stands for product-led growth. Fleet actually has a self-service, pay with a credit card, purchase a license flow on the website, but we do the majority of our business with enterprise contracts, which is more of a sales-led motion of invoicing, signing the contracts, doing the accounts receivable, like in a lot of cases, getting a purchase order. You might be working on closing a deal for 4 months, and you might have gotten to know the person for 6 months prior. Pretty different, right? But at the end of the day, basically the data model is the same. So there are leads. And we're going to define a lead here as something that probably relates to some kind of inbound interest from a prospect, but that definitely requires work from someone in your milieu of CRM users. Whether or not you have a CRM, like the kind of people at your company or at your organization that would be using the CRM, that's kind of who I'm talking about. And so a lead, has like an owner. It has someone is expected to be doing something for a lead. So you can see at Fleet Salesforce instance, we've actually taken leads and we've nestled them inside of contacts. This is not how it works by default. I almost don't want to tell you how it works by default, lest I make it more confusing. But that's kind of how we think about them is, a contact has many leads, an account has many contacts. Here's an account. And an account, again, is just an organization. So this Salesforce thing is kind of like a Rolodex. And you can see, you can design these pages pretty much however you want. You can add like links and stuff. And this job title is automatically enriched, right? So you'll see in the leads here is that I don't actually care too much about who this person is if it's a lead, which I'm mentioning this just in case you are familiar with CRMs and you're like, wait, what? Hold on. Because normally this info is basically denormalized. So a contact, like the LinkedIn, the name, the title would actually live on one of these leads. And that's how it comes by default. If this was a sales app, it would be as if you had duplicated attributes across multiple models when it could have been sort of like pulled out and deduped, normalized. Here you can see there's been 3 leads from this person, from this contact. They have a status. And unfortunately, Salesforce, I just changed this to where it doesn't show you the name of the person, but because Salesforce is like configured this other way by default, then you can't actually even like go in and click the lead. So that's really annoying. Yep, so there's some of the stuff we have for lead qualification. There's the attached contact, that's the account. You can see that there's an owner, which is me. And that is because this is a weird test. Normally, I would never be the owner because I'm not in the rotation. You can even do tooltips, and this is what you'll sometimes hear called BANT, or Budget Authority Need and Timeline, which is just a really simple way of qualifying. Hey, like, should we invest more time here? Or is this person annoyed by us yet? Right? Or is this person actually like enjoying talking to us and we're not bothering them and we weren't confused? This does make sense, right? This is a cool situation for everybody. Like, let's keep talking. That's basically what's going on here. So you can actually see the beginning of a migration equivalent, right? Because you can see here is some random data from the actual account, right? Seems to be an unused attribute because it's not being set. I see a number of hosts, and I see this weird like salutation thing, which I guess is kind of like pronouns, but older. I think they just haven't updated yet. There's actually a support ticket about that in Salesforce's forums. But yeah, you'll see that there's actually, this shouldn't be on the lead, right? Like this is supposed to be on the contact. And that's because this stuff is actually denormalized. It's actually copied. There's even more than that, but I'll spare you. So that is Salesforce. That's our system of record at Fleet. We went over leads, contacts, and accounts. There's also something called an opportunity, and which is part of something called your pipeline, but I think that'll come up on its own, so I'll save that for later. Basically, you know, with all this stuff, your business is just an app and it needs a database to like to be the database, but it's all spread across Salesforce and amongst other things. Rippling has a kind of a cool perspective on that, which we do also at Fleet. There's but nonetheless, like there's kind of two kinds of databases, whether we're talking about some weird like multi-tentacled SaaS database that lives across multiple different vendors, or if we're talking about just like a normal database like you and I might be the most familiar with, something like MySQL or MongoDB. The system of record, the source of truth, is kind of like your relational database. And then reporting and bookkeeping, like your logs, basically, kind of like your logs, or it's kind of something like a time series database. It's like if you've ever used a tool like Splunk or Elastic, like Kibana, it's like one of those, or Snowflake. So Fleeties at Fleet is, and you can read about this in our handbook on fleetdm.com, but there's a spreadsheet basically called Fleeties, and it's a Google sheet that has everyone who currently works at Fleet. Everyone has a unique ID number, right? Yeah, this is what I mean by the database being spread out. Everyone has a unique ID number, and that's the system of record for at Fleet for how we keep track of people. Versus like our multiple payroll systems we use for international or I say international because I'm currently in the US, but everywhere else besides the US and the United States based individuals who work at the company, they get paid out through these different means, right? So we don't want to have to just look in two different systems every time we look up who someone is. So we end up with this kind of system of record, and then these sort of like dependent systems that don't really matter as much. Similarly, and I learned this the hard way when I made a couple of mistakes, but Carta, much like having, you know, Gusto and Plane as separate things, like Carta really isn't the thing you should trust for your source of truth for your current equity in your company. Equity in terms of like stock options that you granted, and investors that you brought on, convertible notes, etc. So we ended up with another spreadsheet called Equity Plan, which is the real source of truth, the thing that we use to run the business with, the thing that we trust. And then Carta is sort of like a thing that gets updated like quarterly with the help of the paralegals, and they do it as like a ritual based on quarterly grants. So you don't have, it's very easy to start off with the log system, the time series system, and think that that's what the real system is going to be. And I guess the advice I'm trying to pass on here is if you can manage to start with like a spreadsheet when in doubt, you may find that that's actually better because the system that you were planning to use can't be your source of truth for some reason. It's always easier to move from a spreadsheet and into a system versus the other way around. And I don't mean just like the basic CSV export that they give you. I mean like a working collaboratable system. Okay, so just one last point on that, like very similar thing for bookkeeping. So QuickBooks is like a system of record for expenses, right? Like how much you actually spent on the company credit cards, how much you paid out to your employees each month, paid to consultants, etc. But QuickBooks also happens to be the system that your bookkeepers go into to label transactions, and it tends to get a little bit like wild. You will have inevitable mistakes in your books when someone accidentally characterizes food as like travel or whatever, right? It's inevitable. It always happens. You try to avoid it. It's something you can KPI and measure and like make sure that you're avoiding. But especially when you're first starting out, like it's inevitable, and so you're going to overlook them for, possibly months at a time sometimes, because you might just have a confusing ledger item. So because of that, and because you use QuickBooks as a tool to create general purpose exports for like all kinds of reports that people ask you for, there's this thing called GAAP, and it represents your revenue in like a totally different way. So QuickBooks can actually end up being both your system of record and also like your time series throwaway thing. Your system of record for your expenses, which otherwise are spread across, you can dig them out of your credit card statements, your bank statements and stuff, but it's annoying. But then when it comes to revenue, you're not really going to look at QuickBooks as a source of truth for your revenue. Like it's correct, but it's not your go-to place. It's not somewhere you can actually make an edit and fix something if it's wrong. Which kind of brings me back to the ultimate time series where all of this stuff feeds into, at least at Fleet, is we have this spreadsheet, a Google Sheet again, called KPIs. This is also where we keep our objectives and key results we use to plan the next quarter. But the KPIs are like everyday excellence, like where are we, how quickly do we merge PRs? Like how quickly are we closing bugs that were opened? Like how quickly did we pay vendors, right? We have a days to pay metric. All of these things are sort of sampled weekly, and then they feed into a bunch of other dependent things like our investor updates, all hands presentations, and board decks. But really, it's just snapshots that are ending up in a spreadsheet. The whole thing could be in any other kind of database and could be a lot nicer, but this was the way that we could do it that worked well enough, and then we just sort of like made it nice. Cool. So now that's the system of record versus the time series thing. Now it's kind of like you understand. Let's zoom out. So you understand now that like what you've been focused on, right, historically, through most of your time as a developer, not to put you in a box, I'm jumping to conclusions here, but like if you're like me, you started off building apps before you really knew all that much about doing business. And your whole life you've kind of lived in the bottom of the funnel, right? Now you're receiving money, you're figuring out how to build this part of the stack, and you are getting money, presumably, right? It's working enough for you to have time to think about anything else. So now you are up top. You're in the kind of lightest blue section here, and you're at the mouth of the funnel. So from website visitor to lead. I won't go into this too deeply because it goes into just a whole, it probably would be another talk, which is really like, how do you get your first customers? But one of the most underrated things you can do, and also one of the least time-consuming things you can do as a founder, or as basically the creator of anything. I never realized it at the time, but I basically did this for Sales.js back in 2012 and 2013. But you got to go just talk to people, right? Because you got to learn, like, you may already understand the pain, you may understand the market. For Fleet, I didn't really, like, I had to learn, I had to go out and learn, right? And regardless, you always are surprised. right? Like I never would have thought with Sales.js starting it that there would be such a stigma at the time against using Node.js with anything but MongoDB. Like for some reason, people had just decided they're like, oh, Mongo, that's cool and new. NoSQL is the bomb.com. And you got to use that if you're going to be using Node.js. Node.js was also like kind of had an IoT bent at the time, and it was really focused on only like high performance systems. It was sort of becoming legendary for replacing like other more traditional ways of serving applications, and like LinkedIn going from 20 servers down to 2 or something, right? So there was this culture that I wasn't exactly a part of in Node that I got to learn about just by being a part of the community. At that time, it was IRC people would hang out in, but now, like Slack communities, tools like Getter. It's really easy when you get funding, for example, if you raise money, or if you're like me, you spent way more time just getting the money, hoarding it, trying to survive, like as a small business, right? Um, as soon as you get any time, it's really hard to kind of say like, let me just take a step back, and I feel like I'm flying blind here. It doesn't take that long to go reach out to some people on LinkedIn or Instagram or X or whatever the right place for your community is. Um, the potential customers, right? And just ask them like, hey, like, what do you think? What kind of problems are you having? Like, what is your dream X, whatever it is? You will learn a ton. It is not as scary or difficult as it sounds, especially with there's some very cheap drip outreach tools out there that can help you just sort of like manage the basic like accept, friend, whatever initial like wave, like, hey, like, do we want to talk to each other? Are we having a conversation? Like, um, you can get a lot of that automated for you very cheaply. Or I mean, what I did is I just did it, at least with Fleet, is I just like reached out to people and just sort of like introduced myself and said like, yo, like, hey, I'm working on this thing. Like, do you want to talk to me? And sometimes people do, and they're really cool. So really recommend that. Personas. So this is the part you probably jump to, right? As someone, if you ever worked on websites, this is the kind of thing you Google, like, how do I make a website? And they're like, find your personas. There's a lot to it to really figure this out from a business perspective, right? Like you got to find this leads you to find out stuff like what you replace. It affects how you sell if you're in a sales-led motion, and it affects how you frame things um, in a product-led growth world where you have a self-service website. You don't want to say like, are you struggling to implement efficient enterprise device management when you're talking to just like some like person that's just normal like engineer like yourself, right? You don't want to just you're more likely to say like, hey, like does your MDM kind of suck? Right? It's a different way of communicating. So that's the language, and then the targeting. So people usually say messaging and targeting for that persona. Targeting is like, how do I find this person on LinkedIn? And I'm going to use LinkedIn as an example because of Fleet, and that's very relevant for our audience. But Sales Navigator is probably the most powerful tool here that can be very precise. But in LinkedIn ads, give me one moment, pause the screen share. So LinkedIn ads actually has slightly less power. And I think some of this is regulation related. Here we go. So again, kind of a censored view just to not reveal a ton about it's confidential about the company, because we are very open about as much as we possibly can be. But when it comes to like how much we're investing in ads, it is like a competitive ad market. And so we don't really want to just be dumb. But you can see here though what our audiences look like, right? So for vulnerability management, there's about 500,000 people that we target for advertising right now for endpoint ops security, which is the endpoint ops product category, but a security audience. So you sometimes with different needs. 1.8 million members. So there's 1.8 million people in the set of target countries, basically. MDM is device management, so people that need to manage laptops, usually just that use case. And then, but it's its own thing. Each of these actually, like, we could probably split these into like 4 more. But I won't nerd out too much on those details. But that's the kind of thing you can see that as you start to spend more time with targeting, you really get a sense of kind of like, hey, like, who am I helping here? Because you can't really help people if they don't have the right problem that you're trying to help. And when you're wanting to scale, you have to really get good at getting the right problems in front of the right people so that they know that it's a match. So that's kind of that's persona, that's targeting, without getting too much more into it. And then there's your website. So this is one we all probably have a lot more familiarity with in this audience. But there's a few things that maybe aren't as obvious, right? Like if you're just building a normal sales app, you're maybe not thinking as much about like, what's my sitemap going to look like in terms of where will and you might be thinking that because again, it's the first thing you see when you Google, I need to build a website, but you're not thinking like, what are the pages I will like invest weeks of time on? Exactly, right? And that's kind of more what I mean here by sitemap. So we'll do a demo in a second, where I'll show you more about like kind of how that works with Fleet. But messaging framework, so this is a little bit more advanced, like you don't need this quite as early, but the thing that happens is you end up collaborating with other people, right? On working on everything, and especially on your website content. And you'll find that it moves out from under you when you stop paying attention because other people are contributing, right? But much like with Wikipedia, you need systems to help you keep track of, hey, did this article on Wikipedia that was about like basketball suddenly get turned into like a story about like, I don't know, woodpeckers and like other forest creatures or something, right? So you got to have a way to kind of like all agree on what you're going to be talking about. So that's what I mean by messaging framework. And really, you can just think of it as like a Google Doc with bullet points of like what are the main 3 things for each of your product categories that you target. Personalization. We've just started doing that with Fleet, and that's actually been even just qualitatively so much more pleasant, I think, for our visitors, and I think for even for our own team to understand better, like, okay, this is like the language we speak to this persona. It's not like weird and anachronistic. We'll do a little tour of that right now. So you can see right now, it says focused on security, not vendors. And I see, okay, tell employees why. Oh, cool, I can explain why my security policies matter. Great. So I can tell you just from looking at this, like, okay, I know what audience I'm getting here, right? I know what buying situation people are in. And then you go to this contact form, and then you see, okay, I see a quote from this person. And I see this is pre-selected, right? So it's decided that I'm a security engineer. On the home page, you can see it's highlighting endpoint ops, which is one of our primary security use case from our customers at Fleet, and then vulnerability management, which is also a security, basically a security product category. You can see that the rest of this stuff is actually all the same below. But here, when it says connect your favorite tools, we're highlighting words like remediations, case management. But if we go back to here and we sort of come at this cold, now you can see the headline changed. This heading actually changed. We're seeing actually additional content featured here. And we're using different nouns and verbs. Because these different audiences, in Fleet's case, use different words to basically kind of talk about the same thing or different use cases for the same features. But much like the conversation we're having right now about sales tools and GTM tech and how really it's all just APIs and database underneath, you can see that this is exactly what's going on here for Fleet, right? Is we're basically selling this product, and because the way this product is sold in different markets has different labels stuck on it, we have to be able to repackage the product in a way that doesn't feel like weird and makes sense, and also highlights the things that people care about. But the beauty of this kind of thing is then you can translate the same, you can kind of like rotate the same product and use it in multiple different ways within an organization from different departments, right? And everyone can kind of get value from it. So it's cool in that way. Personalization is not limited to a product like this, though, right? Kind of a compound startup. You could have this tool in place for just about any app. And it's actually super, super, super easy. We're going to look at an example of how to do it. I think next. We're also going to take a brief look at analytics. Heat maps and A/B testing, I'll skip the demo on the heat map side, but it's kind of cool. Maybe we could do that some other time. But A/B testing, generally, like if you were early on with your business, unless you were an expert in A/B testing, namely that you've done it a lot before and you've actually been the driving marketing force behind that, I would really strongly suggest skipping it. And just kind of like using first principles thinking, and then also measuring, even just like doing a little bit of crazy measuring of just like straight up changing it just to see what happens, which I guess you could call AA testing, and like looking at your Google Analytics every day and being like, well, all right, I'll change it at midnight again. Because you can, frankly, you don't need to test that many things and that'll get you by for a while. I'm going to skip the stuff about lead sources, only to say that there's more here in the slides. I'm also going to skip the other LinkedIn ads and Google Analytics demos for now, but if anybody has questions about that, or if we'd be interested in a follow-up, I'm happy to like just show you if it would help you. Okay, so probably a little ambitious here in terms of the time, but you'll see on the right is actually like the origination of psychological stages at Fleet and kind of how we got there a while back in sort of trying to solve where deals were closing the easiest, where revenue was moving the fastest, and where things could be like better. It's since changed quite a bit, but all right. So just for the sake of, I'm going to assume for a second that you may have not built that many sales apps before, and that you may have not even launched that many websites before, right? And I'm just going to give you a rapid tour through the kinds of things you would want to set up. And all of the code you're going to see here is actually open source in GitHub on Fleet's website. So Fleet's entire website is open source, and as well as the product from top to bottom. And the agent that runs on people's computers. So this was a recent PR of cleaning up the sitemap. I show you this only just to point out, in case you've never seen it before, that websites often have this thing called sitemap XML. It's like a Google thing that you can do to basically just provide what pages are on your website. But if you have dynamically generated content, like for example, for aspects of your reference documentation, or for Fleet, it's the table schema. So like what data tables can I get at off of my devices or off of my servers, off of my Kubernetes containers, whatever. This just shows you the kind of like update from a real world use case that you end up doing. This thing is not that crazy. It's like 100 lines of code, and it's just like, plus equaling the dynamic pages up in there. And then I think there's a gotcha if you have more than 50,000 of these. Like I did this website once in like 2014, and we had a lot of entries in it. And I think you have to like cut it off at 50,000 and paginate it or something, but it barely comes up. Cool. Routes. So I'll just show some examples of redirects. So you can see here some of the core pages. If you're looking at like what pages will I definitely want on my website, I think it's these. It's a home page, it's /contact, it's /pricing. And then for us, it's /start. And I'm getting kind of deep in here. The other thing is that basically your product category pages. So here we have 3 at Fleet. You might have 2, you might only have 1, right? This is kind of the explanation of like, wait, what is this product? Yeah, so then in terms of redirects, you can see it takes quite a bit of energy to maintain pages once you launch them. So you want to be careful about migrating your URLs so you maintain links when people save them or they send them in emails to each other or text messages and stuff, and then they might not open it till a week later. You want the URL still to work. And yeah, and then I'll show you one other little trick, which is this. So we're going to go into personalization a bit in a moment, but you can see here a little bit of a preview. We're using UTM content, which is, by convention, it's a special parameter that is often automatically attached by like ad platforms and stuff, but it doesn't even matter. Like the reason, it's just a param. And it's set to one of these buying situations. This one was used in a radio ad at some point. And then these are actually, you can just share them and they're not like weird and long, and it's good for like a chat conversation. And also you just find yourself using them then all the time. So what it does is it takes you to the appropriate product category landing page, but given who the given your audience, like who are you? And then it personalizes that page using the session. So I'm going to actually leave a lot of this to the imagination for you here for the moment. You'll see everything from code inside of a hook, which is where the primary buying situation uh, session variable is attached. You'll also see some examples of EJS files, redirects. You can see how the questionnaire works, which I think we're going to need to skip that aspect of this talk, but you can go and just try it yourself if you sign up on fleetdm.com and tell your IT team if you work somewhere where we'd be a good fit. You certainly know a lot about our business now. Yeah, so I'll bring this to a close here. So to doing marketing, right? So now you know kind of what that means. I think that there's a lot of it that is still a mystery, but and certainly to me, I'm still learning. But basically marketing programs are the things that you do, the things that you run. They're kind of like hooks in a sales app, actually. They're just like, you like load them up and then they're there. It's just like an agent on an operating system. These are programs that drive psychological progress in the right audience for more of the right kind of stuff. So more sales qualified opportunities, driven by an increase to the amount of caring that people in the ideal customer profile do, or the right vibe. So like a higher net promoter score or higher stickiness, better documentation, traffic patterns, or like more contributors. So the marketing programs that I think are very common and roughly correlate with what we do at Fleet are original content. So putting out social media posts. That's like the very first thing you usually end up doing. And then a blog and then YouTube. Events, so places where we have like a booth or go speak at. And then ads, placed or community content. So going out somewhere else and being on their show. Press releases, digital conversations starting, or AKA outbound, or referrals and influencers. So if I was kind of if I was building a business from scratch, this is the advice I would give myself. So it's the advice I'll give you. For anyone going from 0 to 10 million ARR, or from 0 to 100K ARR, or 0 to 10K ARR, or wherever you're at. This is like the bare minimum and beyond. So as the product owner of go-to-market systems of my company, as even the only founder, let's say, the single employee of the company, I want to, first, you got to lay down the groundwork. So whoever it is that does this is going to need to know how to do the databases. You need to avoid delegating setup to anyone who isn't already experienced working with troubleshooting and working on databases and APIs, or someone that maybe is wanting to learn, maybe they're interested in coding. This is like the thing that you will really, really benefit from. Even if you have an amazing sales operations team in the future, like even if you have a completely outsourced Salesforce instance after a bit, this way you have it built into the heart of your organization, and you can actually, you want to be able to trust what's going on in there. You want to keep things moving. So it's easy to get distracted and not do marketing because there's a lot of other things to do early on. So you want to set up clockwork that just happens. So rituals, like super boring stuff, make it easy to change things frequently. Make sure changes go live immediately and they don't just sit there decaying. So for example, this is what I strongly recommend, even though it's painful, is spend 30 minutes every day reviewing proposed changes to the website. Work with someone else and revise again and again and again until a change passes through your review. 30 minutes set time, reviewer never cancels. You meet every day unless the marketer has no new changes ready to review yet. And I say marketer, but it could be designer, it could be whoever your buddy is. Maybe it's just yourself if it's just you at the beginning. And then the other thing is use change control. So either delegate stuff completely to people or actually lock it down. And I say lock it down in terms of nothing goes live without review. There's people who will contribute really important and great stuff. There's amazing marketers out there, and the other people on your team. And the only thing is that they are not always also good database designers and systems thinkers. So think about that first, basically, before just delegating, and either have a team like Netflix culture style where you have everybody in your team at a level where they can contribute, which that's our focus at Fleet, is getting to where we can remove controls, right? We're trying to get fewer basically reviews to get things done. Wherever you're at in that journey, you at least need to have some kind of audit happening where you're making sure that it's all sort of still making sense, right? And the easiest way to do that is to have somebody that has worked with databases before, keeping an eye on that schema. And when possible, use GitOps. So when possible, put it in CI/CD. That will have a certain filtering effect. It'll give you something to hook onto in the future. And you will find that you may have to encourage people to contribute to it, but you will find that you will prevent a lot of terrible mistakes. And this is not yet possible to do. Well, it's not yet easy to do for ads, but I think that is gotta change, and something I would really love to work on if anybody wants a cool weekend project sometime. Your first 2 quarters. So I'll skim over this section and let you read this mostly yourself, because I've been talking a while, I'm afraid. But your first few months, you gotta make it so that you don't get overwhelmed. You don't get so overwhelmed with marketing that you just kind of stop doing it or forget about it. You don't want to be surprised by a bunch of work. You probably will be, especially if you hire a PR firm at some point. because they're going to start doing a press release and suddenly you're going to have to spend all your time on that, or like a contract will come through and suddenly you'll spend all your time reviewing the contract instead of like doing whatever it was you were trying to do. So at the beginning, you're really distracted. Like it's really hard to stay focused. So you have to like have the disciplines on autopilot, basically. Start with your social media, right? Start with your change cadence for the website. Start with basic thin reporting. Start with messaging framework, but just like literally, what is our tagline and 3 bullets underneath? Like that's it. And then just like go live, right? And you can have someone helping you at this point. Layer on more rituals, right? Then at some point you start budgeting your events every quarter. You start looking at press releases like a few quarters out, and you do a press release every quarter maybe. You maybe start planning out your articles. You have a spreadsheet of content ideas, and then you sort of pick a few and you schedule them in a quarter, once a quarter. Same for your events that you're flying people to make sure it's a good investment. I'll skip that demo, but at Fleet, we also have all these responsibilities and rituals documented in our public handbook. After you have the basics set up, you need to prioritize the hard stuff, basically. Learn your market. This is where you're talking to people and you're really starting to map out, like, what do we say to people that helps them understand why this is a good idea? And then once you understand your market, we'll see an example of that, I think. You can actually do things. So at this point, you're likely other company-wide systems exist. So you have some way to do project management, like Kanban boards or whatever, some way that everybody's using issues. Maybe it's GitLab. OKRs, you have some way of like getting strategically focused on a few things every quarter as an entire company. You're actually capturing good snapshots of weekly KPI data just in a spreadsheet, let's say. You are reviewing budgets of any kind, like from marketing. So whether that's for events, like wherever you're spending money, if you're doing ads, then it's related to that, but somewhere you're spending money in marketing. So like, what is it that you're actually doing? Because then you can spend more money in case something works. At this point, the market is known. You at least know like what is the Gartner name for this thing we do. If you're like Fleet and enterprise, or the strategy is clear. You know like what is it that we do to close deals or enable orders on a self-service website. And most importantly, like people are not having to like reinvent the wheel about how to go do the marketing. So this is where you can actually bring in marketing talent, and there's some content here about that, but I'll skip it. So here's some examples. So here's kind of how press release planning looks. This is just like a table of contents. And then on the right, that's like an example of a recent press release. This is an example of event planning. So you can see it's pretty financially focused. It's about like, let's run lean. Like we don't want to be just blowing money on this stuff. And we focus mostly on how can we minimize the number of people, because that's where it can really blow out of proportion with flights and hotels, which often cost more than like a sponsorship. The best thing is to be speaking. These are OKRs at Fleet. This is just kind of the bottom, but it shows you the general idea. This is what investor updates look like. We're transitioning to this spreadsheet now. Some examples of just like graphing the snapshots you've been taking. And just some of the stuff that you end up wanting to build, right? So how do we target? What are those product categories? AKA like what do we replace? What competitors' budget do we eat? If any, or like if something else, like what are we competing with? Is it some annoying thing that people are having to do, or is it just some like just unawareness and this is some great new vitamin that they can take or whatever? And then sort of what's core for you, for your brands. What is it that makes this the thing that for us fleet should do? And then you prioritize that. And that's it. So if you'd like to see any of the code that we went over, links are in the PDF for this talk. And you can also visit fleetdm.com, go to our public handbook, and learn more about the company. That also has a link to the GitHub from there. There's a folder called website, and that's the Sails.js app. You'll know what to do from there. It tells you how to build it if you want to build it locally, play around. You can even plug in some of your own API keys if you want to like really just mirror the whole thing. And you can even, frankly, fork, be careful when you fork to only fork the website, but please, the website folder, because there is some code that is licensed in the Fleet repo just at the top level. It's in a little EE folder. But other than that, feel free to like fork and run your own copy of the Fleet website and adapt it for your needs, especially if you have a similar kind of company. You know, don't deploy like 20 copies of mirrors because it'll hurt our SEO, please. But yeah, if you just want to play around and understand it as a demo, like please be my guest. Thank you all so much for your like taste in using Sails.js and being interested in it. And I hope to continue to work with Sails.js and contribute back indefinitely. And this will be the framework, again, that I use for the rest of my life. So thank you, Kelvin, for continuing to do an awesome job running the community and maintaining the framework. And thanks, Eric, as well, because Eric is the silent just knight in shining armor that comes in and does vulnerability checks at my house with me, and has like weekly or something, like for as long as I can remember. So thank you, Eric, for helping everything continue to run with Sails.js and make it such a great framework to build stuff like this. I wish everyone an amazing Sailsconf, and I will see you in Nigeria next year for Sailsconf 2025. Stoked to see everyone's talk.